The 6th of June, 1944, D-Day. Morning on the Normandy coast did not arrive with triumph so much as with a long, concentrated waiting. The sky over the English Channel was leaden gray, the wind carrying a damp salt tang. The sea looked like a strip of iron along which thousands of ships must pass. On the horizon lay an endless armada. Transports, landing craft, destroyers, minesweepers, in all several thousand vessels, from battleships to little barges. About 156,000 Allied troops went ashore on those beaches, Americans, British, Canadians, and units from other nations, all under the overall command of Dwight Eisenhower. It was a vast, precisely tuned machine of assault where every piece mattered. The silence before the assault was taut. The creak of rigging, the muted hum of engines, the rustle of uniforms, all of it blended into an uneasy expectation. Ahead were minefields, concrete pillboxes, machine gun nests. The weather was fickle. Low cloud hindered morning air cover, but then breaks appeared and the aircraft joined the operation. Normandy became a lodgment from which the enemy had to be pushed and his defenses ripped apart. Several weeks later, after bloody fighting at the beaches and a stubborn struggle to hold the lodgment, the Allies had an opening to move to a more decisive phase, to turn local gains into a strategic breakthrough. That was the aim of Operation Cobra, launched in late July 1944. Massive aerial bombardment followed by a rapid American ground attack in the Avranches area. The breakthrough came, the German defense cracked, and a path into the heart of France opened before the Allies. It was at this moment that a man who habitually acted fast and decisively stepped to center stage, General George S. Patton. He firmly believed that war was a matter of tempo. While others calculated risks and shuffled supply timetables, Patton thought differently. Giving the enemy time was giving him the chance to recover and construct a new defense. His creed was simple: movement itself is a weapon. Under his command, forces were assembled that would become known as the Third Army. Corps, divisions, armored formations, and support services, tens of thousands of men and hundreds of vehicles capable of maneuver. Staff officers used their formulas: advance only once the rear areas were prepared and supply was secure. Eisenhower sought balance, reduce casualties, and avoid exposing the entire offensive plan to undue risk. Patton issued orders in another key: forward, fast, don't stop at every ditch. His commands were short and direct. He demanded initiative from junior commanders. Do not grapple with every fortification. Bypass it, cut communications, appear in the enemy's rear. The tactic was not close-in assaults, but a race along roads and lanes, where every captured bridge or broken roadway became a blade in the Wehrmacht's back. The columns moved at dawn. Red plumes of dust, the hum of engines, the rasp of treads. In that noise, there was a logic of swift movement. Turning maneuvers, rapid regrouping, repairs performed on the go. Drivers and mechanics worked without rest. Supply elements pushed fuel trucks wherever they were needed. Signal units stitched together communication lines that were stretching too fast. In such conditions, the initiative of a company commander could decide the outcome of a local fight. In 48 hours, the Third Army covered distances once thought impossible, more than 100 miles in 2 days. Radio reports arrived late, maps became out of date faster than coordinates could be marked, and when the updates reached the Supreme Headquarters, Dwight Eisenhower, looking at the refreshed map, exclaimed, "My God, he's already there!" In those words was a mixture of surprise, alarm, and acknowledgement. Patton had moved the plan into motion faster than anyone expected. Why did this work? Because Patton's speed struck the enemy's nerve centers first. The Wehrmacht, exhausted and demoralized after weeks of fighting, did not expect such a rapid turn of events. Commanders, busy dealing with local resistance, found themselves forced to prioritize immediate problems, while American units were appearing in their rear. Supply ships and depot stocks wrestled with logistics problems for a day or two, while Patton demanded his men go even faster. This was not a reckless dash. Patton calculated risks. He understood fuel would run low, vehicles would break down, and stretched flanks could become vulnerable. But he also knew that if he did not quicken the pace now, the Germans would have time to mount an organized counterattack and build new defensive lines. He chose risk as a tool, risk with a clear purpose. Liberation unfolded at a frantic pace. Small villages ceased to be pockets of resistance one after another. Then larger towns followed, where every street could be a trap. Joy and fear lived side by side. Some people grasped that the occupation was over. Others still did not know whether fighting would flare back up within the hour. Civilians did not pour into the streets at once. They peered from cellars and doorways, waiting for the shooting to stop. American columns moved through smoke and rubble without lingering. Their mission was not to celebrate liberation, but to keep moving. Signal units and headquarters followed close behind, often under fire, occupying intact buildings, prisons, and warehouses. These places did not become triumphant icons so much as nodes of supply, temporary command posts, and staging bases. In a campaign that moved so quickly, order did not establish itself immediately, but only as the front pushed forward. Patton walked the columns day and night. He stopped at company commanders, asked about fuel, the condition of the vehicles, and the men's morale. His demands were wrapped in a kind of care. He knew that soldiers' exhaustion would instantly reflect on the army's effectiveness. Sometimes he personally climbed into a truck or a tank and rode forward to see the situation firsthand and to encourage the troops. His command style was blunt, but people respected results. When an order was carried out, lives were saved. But speed brings its own problems. There were cases when supply echelons could not keep up with the armor, when artillery lagged and left tanks without necessary fire support, when recovery units could not raise broken vehicles quickly enough. There were local counterattacks in which the Germans managed to inflict damage. Patton knew the risks and reacted. He redistributed forces, pulled units back to cover lines of communication, sent reconnaissance to find the shortest supply routes. Sometimes he made unpopular choices, leaving a small rearguard and throwing the main mass forward. But more often those decisions paid off. The enemy lost bearings, supply lines frayed, and resistance collapsed.
The psychological effect of speed was no less significant. Wehrmacht soldiers later recalled that the most terrifying thing was not that Americans appeared in the fight, but the rumor that they were already in the rear. Panic, uncertainty, disorientation, all of this compounded the collapse of the defense. Commanders were forced to divert reserves, shift forces to threatened sectors, and that only accelerated their defeat. By mid-August, Patton's actions had turned into a pursuit phase. The Third Army was less intent on grinding for every position than on expelling the enemy from his lines of communication, cutting railway hubs, seizing bridges and roads. In those days, Patton proved that war was changing. It was no longer trench positional fighting, but a race for resources and movement. Every town taken reduced the enemy's options. Eisenhower watched these events with restraint. He understood the cost of every risk and took on the task of keeping the campaign within a broader strategic frame. At the same time, he acknowledged that the initiative of an individual general could produce results that a plan alone might not. His startled, "My God, he's already there," reflected not so much fear as recognition. Patton had done what needed to be done. With speed and will, he upended the expected course of events. By the end of the campaign, France indeed began to breathe freer, but that breath was heavy. Liberated towns greeted the Allies not with festivals, but with ruins. Shattered neighborhoods, blackened squares, twisted rails and bridges lying in rivers. Electricity and running water were absent. Roads were choked with wrecked equipment and the detritus of war. Victory had been paid for at a high price. Exhausted soldiers, supply lines stretched to the limit, equipment worn thin by unceasing marches and fighting. But for Patton, that price was unavoidable. He held that a war could not be won by caution alone, only by tempo and determination. In the end, when maps lay still once more on the staff tables, historians counted the miles, months, and losses. But for those who had marched in those columns and watched towns shift from the night of war to the day of liberation, another image remained. The smell of gasoline, the hum of engines, cries of joy, and the grim yet clear voice of a general who demanded one thing: move fast, act decisively, and give the enemy not a minute to recover. It was this tempo, wielded as a decisive weapon, that entered the legend of the Third Army and became part of the history of Europe's liberation.